was about he wasn't very old. He was about 7, I think, at the time, and Rocky had just broken in America, the movie.
Right.
But I had been unaware. I had been kind of slightly unaware of this moment, you see.
Right.
And he was. I went down to the pool and said, "Come on, darling boy, it's time to go home. Get up the pool. We've got to get dressed." I turned around and walked back to the room. There was a couple, American couple, in the pool, and the woman turned to her husband. She went, "Riff Raff." And I thought, I wonder, I wonder where this is coming from.
I think perhaps you better both come inside.
Fleeting. Madness takes its toll.
I was in the technical theater. I was in theater, and then I got really into technical theater, and I had to quit school because of a lot of abuse at home. And this is a story of a lot of people that were affected by your work. And my theater friends basically called up and said, "Will you come to see Rocky?" And I said, "What's Rocky?" A boxing film or something, you know. And it was the best choice of my life because immediately the circle that kept me comfort in school was the same circle that gave me the safe space for the few years that I needed to make changes in real life.
Excellent.
So being able to play this one particular character 154 times, essentially
Wow.
embodying the
Uh,
character,
yes.
owning the character no less, territorially owning the character no less. It changed a lot of things I didn't know affected me until kind of this new era when your son created this great film. And I thought it did have an impact. It really did make a difference to a lot of people for an amazing amount of reasons. So from my heart to you, I thank you
Yes.
profoundly.
Well, I'm terribly grateful. Of course, none of this was ever intended.
Right.
And it really is when you it's difficult for me to get my head around because it is the sort of musical that was written in a 13-year-old boy's bedroom, isn't it? It's it,
Right.
it
He's lucky. I'm lucky. We're all lucky.
it's not a great piece of work. It is a childish, I don't know, teenage kind of world,
Right.
and it was only supposed to be 3 weeks fun, and that's the absolute truth. We all
Right.
went into it. We're going to have 3 weeks fun with this, and the 3 weeks turned into 5 weeks on that original run, and then it ran for 7 years in London. In the
Yeah.
meantime, the film had opened and bombed, and then opened again and did the midnight screenings, and it was here we are 50 years later, and it is extraordinary, really. It is quite extraordinary because, as I say, it just wasn't meant to be. It was meant to be an entertainment, a light,
Right.
a musical comedy.
Well, nice.
The irony is that it started at the Royal Court Theatre. The Royal Court Theatre was the English stage company, and
Yeah.
they'd taken over that theatre in the early 50s, I think about 1952, to encourage new writing for the theatre, muscular writing for the theatre that would have social impact. And they
Mhm.
didn't like our piece. They never really have ever liked our piece.
They didn't like me! They never liked me!
Right.
Because it wasn't what they were about, but yet it's the only piece that ever has anything that's come out of there that really actually fulfills their remit. And it embarrasses them because it shouldn't be this way. And we really have had, so we can definitely say with our hands firmly on our heart, it really has had social impact.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what that English stage company was set up to produce. And yet they're in a kind of state of what to know, but unease about the whole thing. It was embarrassing. I was with Bob Hoskins.
Uh-huh.
You
Oh yeah,
remember
Bob
Bob
Hoskins, sure.
Hoskins?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. Well, we were having a chat together because Bob and I started at the Royal Court as well,
Mhm.
both doing Sam Shepard plays as it happens.
Hmm.
And I said, but the odd thing is because look back in anger is the biggest other next to Rocky is the biggest known, the best known title ever to come out of this Royal Court Theatre. And I said, well, the thing is, you see, I said, it's even better, it's done better, performed more than Look Back in Anger. And that was a sacred cow. Look Back in Anger is a sacred cow.
Right.
And he looked at me and he went, well, it's not a very good play, is it, Richard? And I looked around, I thought, whoops, are you allowed to say that out loud? I don't think so.
Right. But, I think this really kind of brings about what's so magical about Rocky is that you had a moment, if I understand from the documentary, which we're going to come to, this great work your son did, where when Dory Hartley was in the middle of the crowd and the spotlight goes to her and your character leapt out into the audience, everything changed. So would you talk a little bit about the path from...
Well, no, that moment was at Long Island, wasn't it? I think. And it was the first time I'd have been aware of a shadow cast or of the fan club, in fact.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for coming tonight. And thank you for all being completely insane.
When was your first experience seeing it with a crowd?
I think it's the first time seeing it at Long Island. There was a convention in a big hall, and there were, I would think, about at least 1,000 people there. And we all went out on stage and did a Q&A with the audience. And then they showed the movie on a big stage, and there was a lot of space in front of it. And a girl called Dory Hartley was a Frankenfurter impersonator. And when it got to that I'm going home moment, she looked exactly like him, the makeup perfect, and she sat on the front of the stage. Someone had put a spotlight on her, and it was astonishing because there was the movie up there with Tim singing I'm Going Home and doing this with the eye makeup. And there's a real live person in a bright spotlight doing the same movements. And her silhouette was exactly the same size as Frankenfurter. And the audience was singing the refrains. And you go, this is theatre at its very best. We couldn't have rehearsed and organized this. This is a spontaneous moment where live theatre and audience, live audience and cinema have come together like that in a way that I've never seen before. It was quite remarkable.
Let's bridge the gap between you going into the theater for the first time you ever thought to even be an actor, to Dory being there in front of you as one of your characters. How did you decide one day, I'm going to be an actor and I'm going to go into the stage and I'm going to learn the bard and I'm going to learn the method, etc.? How did that happen for you?
I was lucky that I was born when I was. The 1960s, when both in America and Great Britain were times of great social change. Again, working class heroes had happened, and you didn't have to wear a suit and tie and go to the Royal Academy of Dramatic Art to be an actor any longer. The side door to the theatre had opened, and ordinary common folk were now allowed to audition and play roles, and working class heroes and what they're called kitchen sink dramas. Out of that, Albert Finney.
Sure, the great Albert Finney.
I think of a lot of his contemporaries. He was one of the first, you see, working class boys now allowed to perform and be actors, and in legitimate theatre. I mean, heavy duty, Royal Shakespeare and all the rest of it. It was a great time, and I was there.
That's
and
amazing.
So getting into the theatre, I like you. If I was unemployed, I pumped gas, I cleaned people's houses, I did all that.
I worked at a bike shop and then I played Riff.
I did all that, but I also did what you did. You see, I used to work backstage in the theatre and be there every night, watching people perform on stage. I worked in every except for the laundry, the wardrobe. I never worked in the wardrobe, but I worked in electrics and the flies. I did every job. and that's all I ever wanted to do. And all where I wanted to be. I was very lucky. I got into a production in 1969, a production of Gulliver's Travels. It was a Christmas production, and it was the full gamut. It wasn't just Lilliput. We went to Brobdingnag and the Island of Death and the Laputa space station. We did the whole book, and it was wonderful. It was the whole cast together, no stars, and I liked that. Was lovely. And there I met a choreographer, a Japanese Canadian choreographer called David Taguri, who was looking for people to go into a tour of hair around Great Britain. Right. I got into that, and that was it really. And everything started to kick off. So that's how I got into it. And also rode horses in movies in the area. And so I got my equity card back in the early 60s, before I went to the theatre, moved to the theatre. And I just love it. I just love it. I love the lights going down. I love the hush that takes over the audience. The lights come down and the curtain's just about to go out, and people lean forward in their seats. They don't know they're doing it, but the expectation of what's coming. And I just adore storytelling. We always have, haven't we, as human beings? Around the campfire, telling about the day's journey, the day's hunt. Probably is one of the first moments of theatre we ever shared as human beings.
Yeah, and so I think it as there's something about the role of interactivity for performance, especially like I said, moving into the area where Shadowcast came out and the whole story became very 3D. The characters are now in the audience. The people participating back and forth and shouting back at the characters. It took over your production later, but then people took on their own lives, their own casting, their own costumes, and 50 years later, they're still doing it. I mean, I remember going to a show. I'm 56 now, so it was about 10 years ago, and I walked up and I'm getting asked if I've ever been to Rocky. And immediately I had to assume your voice. You've arrived on a rather special night. It's one of the master's affairs. And they immediately, okay, you could go now. But it was beautiful. And also, I didn't take over the production emotionally, like some senior person who goes, well, let me show you how to do this. I enjoyed a new group of people, like a young man in Fort Lauderdale named Josh was playing your character. And I will never forget Josh, because I got to kind of course, evaluate whether he was doing it the way I thought it should be done. And then he was his own incarnation of Riff. He was his own way of playing it, and everyone else in the cast was that way. And so I think it's fantastic that it's that way.
Yes, I'm glad as an actor that I don't actually have to confront a noisy audience any longer. It's in New York, as you know, it's just opened, and they had some serious kind of problems with the audience taking over the room in the evening and in a way spoiling it, which is a shame. But I'm glad I haven't had to deal with it. I've played the narrator from time to time, but because I am the author, I don't get a lot of stick, because most of the narrators we've had in the live shows have come from another arena. They've been on television, or morning television, or whatever, and so they come with a background that the audience know about, and they get a lot of stick that way. You see, if they're a cook, for instance, they'll get a lot of nonsense thrown at them about that. I didn't have to confront that as the author, and so I was able to keep things to a minimum, and not engage too much, and the more seriously it's ever played, the funnier it becomes. It should never be played for comedy. It should really be played as one of the most serious plays ever written. And then by default, it becomes funny.
Everything leaves out. Right. I think that jumping from Charles Gray to Rachel Dratch is a beautiful way of seeing that evolve in the narrative alone. Because when I see her
Yes, well,
doing those
then,
clips that are popping up all over social media now, it's
yes,
like,
yes,
okay,
but
yeah.
you see, rock is not so much a part of writing; it's a collection of themes, and the
Right.
narrator is well, every line I wrote for the narrator, I wrote for a man called Edgar Lustgarten,
Ah,
even though he
interesting.
was wasn't going to play the part because
Hmm.
he was a narrator. He was a man that looked a bit like a dishevelled bloodhound. And wore baggy suits, and he was a barrister, and he dramatised some of the tales from the New Scotland Yard and the Old Bailey, and
Hmm.
used to read them on radio, and then moved to film in the early
Yeah,
50s,
right.
British film, and he had his delivery was bloodhound as well. And so every line I wrote, I wrote as if it was going to be him speaking these lines, you see.
I would like, if I may, to take you on a strange journey.
Brilliant.
And it was just yet another theme that I'd grabbed and put into the place, like the adverts, the Charles Atlas advert. I mean, that's a reference that young people today, won't have any idea
Yeah,
of. But
all
it
these
doesn't
things are
matter, does
gone,
it?
right?
He carries the Charles Atlas seal of approval.
A weakling weighing 98 pounds.
Yeah,
doesn't
some of those
matter.
references are lost, but it'll transcend in a different way. Yeah.
I know one
Yeah.
of the wonderful things about it is that all those people that I did mention drop into their whatever happened to Fay Ray. Fay Ray sent Tim a card when he opened on the Roxy.
Right.
That was terribly nice. I know that Steve Reeves was very pleased to have his name mentioned.
Hmm.
Jeanette Scott, I actually met at the BBC. She said, "Oh
Hmm.
my goodness me, you've immortalised me." I said, "How lovely is that?" And I know that God bless Lily Sincere.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Lily Sincere was a vaudeville artist, and I had had a book sent to me by an American journalist writer who was it was a book on American vaudeville. And she had a section, and she told me that she was incredibly delighted to have had her name included in the piece. And that's
Absolutely.
lovely, isn't it? It is lovely.
Well, I think it's beautiful because what you did with their work is much like we want to do with your work and their work, is to just kind of put them in a place where it showed what the effect was on you. And I'm also in an era where we would have late night movies that they don't really have that now because you have the 24-hour cycle of cable. And in fact, I saw Shock Treatment before I saw Rocky because HBO would air it, late at night, right? But before, without cable television alone, we would have strange late night movies that would be shown, only at late night because they were just strange enough that was probably the one place you could put them. And for kids
Yes.
that would stay up, this was it.
Yeah. Yes. In fact, that's one of the reasons I wrote it, because that was very, television in those days in 1970, 71, 72, 73 used to shut down at midnight.
Right,
And
right.
they knew that the only people watching it after 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night were going to be insomniacs, drunks, and people like myself. And so those sort of
Misfits.
movies went on.
They're wonderful misfits. So I have an existential batch of questions. Since you're the creator, who was my father? As Riff, if I'm Riff Raff, where do I come from?
Darkness must go down the river of night.
Riff Raff is Frankenfurter, the old queen of Transylvania, the planet, is the mother of Frankenfurter, and Riff Raff is in the military. He was sent down to watch over Guido, be there, and that was he and his sister. They were supposed to be looking out for Frank because he was troublesome, and that was their job. The nice thing about the Igor character, which he really is based upon, isn't he? that resentment is always watchable, and we like to see people driven by resentment and anger. And one of the lovely things was that Tim, being such a handsome chap and so good at the part of the role, you know, it was very easy for me, skinnier middle me, and Igor me, to be completely resentful. He's having a great time. I did all the work. I built the body. It was me. I did all.
Oh yeah. I've made a career out of being that guy, my friend. Instead of being on stage, I like working behind the artists, and then when they get all the glory, you get that little moment. Yeah, sure, of course, it was great. How do you think that Frank, especially, I mean, I still think that really Tim's emergence as Frank is still going to be one of the most all-time great entries in film ever. You know, the character itself.
He stepped up, didn't he? Big time, and it was, and of course, he wasn't as glamorous when we were on stage. It was a lot more German expressionistic, ghoulish makeup and that kind of thing. When we got to the movie, Frankenfurter became slightly more glamorous. Makeup became more glamorous, and the frocks were slightly more glamorous. Because on stage in the beginning, I mean, there were rips in his fishnets, that he had track marks down here and blood running down, and a big sticking plasters across his hand and bruising from where he'd been shooting up and whatnot. Or there's quite a scary character. Yeah. And yet, for the first time, women in the audience went, "Hello," and it was very interesting. Yeah. Because they were surprised at their own attraction to this person, this creature. It was an interesting time.
I mean, it's really changed. I mean, when I was talking to Linus about the film, his documentary on you, and the consequences of this work, I mean, we're sort of in a state of regression, especially in America. But we've advanced a lot. You know, I did, after thinking about the interview and discussion, we have really advanced a lot where things that, were seemed to be difficult for society, 50 years ago became fairly mainstream. And even with some regressions, some things are not going to go back. Some things are just
we can't be other than what we are. I mean, we can't be other than what we are by default.
Amen.
And it's the world weeps for America at the moment. One of the most disgusting human beings ever to draw breath on, and he's openly disgusting on a daily basis. Yeah, you've abandoned rationality. I mean, I don't know how you've fucking done it, but America's abandoned rationality, and you've let this monster loose with all those dreadful enablers. I mean, it's sickening, isn't it? Absolutely sickening.
Well, see, I got up and moved to Ukraine, and see, our president has worn fishnets, been mocked for doing so, and that's why I like him. I live in a full-blown war here, and we look over our shoulder to America, and our guy gets it. We have a comedian who is fighting for existential reality and has been on stage with fishnets and high heels and done it perfectly, beautifully, no less. That's why I like him better. I even had to tell you what's really funny is when I told my audience I would be interviewing someone super magical. I said, "You guys will not believe who I'm intending to interview." First, they went, "Zelensky?" No, I could. That's a cool idea, but no, I would rather interview this person. You'd rather interview someone else more than Zelensky? This particular person, yes. But yes, of course, Volodymyr Zelensky is more than welcome to come on the show. But partially because, in all seriousness, I think that I too underestimated, or I hadn't quite reflected on what this movie had done for people till I watched your son's new amazing documentary, and seeing people come out and reach out to you guys to interview and say, "You've changed my life." You really did. You gave a room for people to be able to really not only embrace themselves, but maybe even go beyond whatever the boundaries were. And I think that that's a great career thing to leave for everyone.
I'm delighted that it's happened, because it's icing on the cake, isn't it? We never expected that. It's all. I guess it was always going to be a subversive work.
Sure.
Although I didn't particularly. I mean, as far as I was concerned, all I was doing was writing a silly comedy.
Right.
I didn't see it as subversive. I just thought I was writing a comedy, and that was it really. So it's just it's astonishing. It still completely amazes me. It's wonderful. It's wonderful. And in fact,
I hope
tomorrow
I hope it reciprocates to you, because like when I do work here in Ukraine and people thank me, I don't really know what to do with it because I'm doing it from a different part of my consciousness. And
Yes,
it's all I didn't do it to have something come back. I did it
no,
just because it's the right way to do it. And actually I kind of get off on the emotion of giving. So it comes back, and I think that I see that in you guys, both you and Linus, because I want to shift to this project that he did, this wonderful creation, Strange Journey,
yes,
because
it's-
that's what he saw in this, was that you
yeah.
had affected a lot of people. So tell me your angle of what you saw in this relationship with you and Linus to where this documentary came out. And if you wouldn't mind, you could pick up where you said it affected his life, where he grew up in the rocky orbit. How
Yes.
how Linus to now and this comes, because I think I would like my audience to know a lot more about what your son has accomplished here from your angle.
Yes, well, the fact that Rocky was turning 50 attracted a lot of attention, and there were overtures from several production companies that wanted to come on board and do it. But when Linus said he wanted to do it, I think, well, why not have a safe pair of hands on the tiller? Because you
Right.
never know what these other people are going to do. They know when they want to turn it into something other. I knew that Linus would be treating it with care. Is what needed to, because the shadow cast, all those people we talk about that you say that's helped, they need to be looked after as well. And what I would have hated was for somebody to start ridiculing them, especially, and that can happen once you give your rights to somebody to do it. Keeping
Right.
control of the direction.
Right.
Could become difficult. So that was the reason Linus that was allowed to and gratefully allowed to take over the project, and he made such a lovely job of it.
He really did.
It's exceptionally well edited. The segueing from music to image to dialogue is wonderful. It's lovely. And doesn't leave you wanting. It doesn't leave you, wanting more. And it doesn't. It's very satisfying. It's delightfully put together.
I'm very proud of what he did, and actually, like I said, I'm looking forward to seeing all the other things he's done, because getting to know him and seeing the work he's done, I see a beautiful person who's definitely a good creative offspring for the master himself, and we definitely want to see that grow.
Yes.
There's a lot of people, I've been watching the videos, like I said, these people who've been affected by you. And I recently reached out to Dory Hartley to say,
Yes.
she and I will have a conversation soon also, because
Okay, cool.
we're differently kind of peers. I mean, she's certainly the great Dory Hartley. But how we feel as someone who just kind of decided to go participate, and what it did for us. Now we have the era of cosplay. I have one of the friends who played my friend Lynn, who played in the Shadowcast in Fort Lauderdale. These people, they have advanced participation in these cosplay circles where their lives are really, I would say, healthy, and filled with camaraderie with people who love to be creative at a level most of the rest of society is not even bothering with. It's great.
Yes, it's delightful. Absolutely delightful.
Did you know we had an airing of Rocky here in Kyiv during war in October 2024 here in it was October, so it's kind of the typical place when Rocky gets that airing.
Was this the movie?
Yeah. I missed it. I didn't know it was even. I was a little upset because I would have gone, but America House, which is one of the the entities that helps promote culture and bridge the Ukrainian world with the Western world. They did an airing at Kino Theater here in Kyiv, and I was talking to Linus. We should do like a double feature with strange journey into Rocky, and
Marvelous.
keep it alive, because we have a community here. And the president,
Of course.
actually, Zelensky, just got through saying it's very important to back LGBT rights in Kyiv. That expression of independence is that, and that's a very important voice to have here in the country.
Excellent. Yes, that is lovely. I mean, there's enough of it's not, it's not on the front not on the front burner for Zelensky at the moment, is it? But it's nice to know
No.
that there's that.
Yeah, with all the things that are existential reality, when those things happen, when they get said for a certain community, it means a lot, because they don't get forgotten
Yes.
in the war. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
One thing I'm really concerned with, and this is sort of like our big final thought for now, and I would love to have you come back. And I have an idea for another program another time, which is
All right.
Richard's favorite music bin, like just to get on and for like an hour talk about the coolest songs everyone sort of forgot, but they're the coolest tunes ever. Because when I listen to these songs, especially when you strum them on guitar, and I love that that's in the documentary, because I like to pull out the acoustic, and now I've been playing these songs that you wrote.
Yeah.
But I always go, what flavor of Richard's young ears brought that tune together? What was the ingredient? But so maybe in the future, if you're open to it, we should do such a thing where we just
I
kind
was
of
a,
plot
I,
a playlist.
I was a teenager the very year that the term was coined. My elder siblings, they weren't allowed to be
There you
teenagers,
go.
but
They
I
didn't
was a
get to be.
teenager. And rock and roll. I used to think every rock and roll record was written especially for me.
Right. That's great. We have kids in a smart media, smartphone, like YouTube quick media era. And what I was really obsessed over this last few weeks thinking about talking with you was, we didn't have that exactly like that when we literally had to go see live music. Maybe we had some cassettes, we get out our
Yes.
LP, but we had to go see live music. We had to go see theater in person. And more importantly is when Rocky turned into VHS, all of us cast people went, why? We just really didn't relate to it. We really knew that Rocky was in the theater. It's a place you go, because when you stand in front
Yes.
of TV, you can't do all the antics with the screen. It just didn't translate for us. And so now that it's even smaller,
Yes.
we don't know how to do any of those things. What do you think about all that?
Well, we didn't release it onto VHS until it was the 15 years anniversary, I think.
Yeah.
15 years of live theatre and
Right.
live cinema. And then it was released onto VHS, I think.
Yeah.
And now, of course, it's on everything. It is I love the collective experience. I mean, we miss it, don't we? The cinemas aren't as full as they used to be. They're not as big as they used to be. We don't share together. Once again, in the 60s, when you listen to the radio, it was the same station in Great Britain anyway, the BBC,
Right.
BBC One, and so everybody, uncles and aunties knew the hit parade along with us young kids. They may not have liked it, but we have these shared collective experiences. And once with television, so few channels, we all talk. The whole of Great Britain would talk about the Christmas show, the same Christmas show. We share these collective experiences, and we no longer have that. Everybody watches what they want to on their own device at different times, as you say, and from different areas, and we don't have these collective experiences very often anymore. And so Rocky's great for that. It is a collective experience that keeps people together and having a party, and because we need more of that. Otherwise, we're all becoming very insular, staying at home and watching our phones or YouTube or whatever, and independent of each other, and that's a tragedy. We see, and I don't know where you are, but where I'm in
Kyiv. Yeah, I'm in Kyiv. So
well, we see our neighborhoods no longer neighborhoods. They have
Right.
loads of people living individually in independent houses, but they don't know their neighbors the way they used to 30 or 40 years ago.
Right.
And they keep calling it the such and such community, but it's not a community. It's just people who live there but don't know each other any longer. It's it's a whole new world, and AI is going to intrude even more in this insular world. It's terrifying. I'm well past my by date on as far as all that's concerned.
Right.
I'm very old fashioned and non-tech, low tech, no tech. I don't even have a phone. Isn't that marvelous?
It is actually. I would love to be. I would be better off without my phone. I live with the
We
war
all would.
itself is hard, but I
We
usually
all
get
would.
stressed when I pull up the phone and Donald Trump is called Putin again. So my phone is my number one stressor. My community is not. I love my community actually. You kind of bring up something that happened here in Kyiv. I lived with a Ukrainian family not too far from here for the first 3 years of the war. And then I moved here to a new studio on the top floor. And the first thing I said when I went to see my adopted mom, "How are you?" I said, "It's just not the same over there." "Well, what do you mean?" I said, "Well, here in our neighborhood, only a kilometer away or so, everyone sort of knew each other. We'd fist bump the children, the kids, the dogs,
Mhm.
the older
Yes.
ladies. And then I get to this new place, and everyone's nice, yeah. But we're in
Yes.
towers, and we live near each other, and we're polite, but it's not as
Yes.
engaging as the other location. And I felt it existentially enough to verbalize it. But I will say one thing I
Yes.
love about this country is theater is alive.
Mhm.
Interactivity and connectivity is alive. People love to make film. People love to sing. People love to have musicals. I live in a country that has really brought out the culture that the country I come from is sort of mollifying, or it's too dispersed to really relate to it. But not here. It's very much a part of existential reality. And so, as both of us being creative people, to see a country and a people who really see that culture is a part of human expression at a level that most people may forget is really refreshing, actually. And I know there's a lot of fans here in Ukraine and Kyiv that would say, thank you also, or as we say, Дякуємо, Richard O'Brien, for creating something that people really love. So, yeah, we really keep theater alive here. Music is very much alive here.
I
And
wonder, is it? I mean, I would imagine somebody could get the stage rights.
absolutely.
Why did you, has anyone done a live performances for the show?
Not in the sense of stage. The actual stage performance version would be an amazing thing, and I happen to know a lot of wonderful creative people who, like I said, all of
Why
those
don't we make
parts of
that
the arts
happen?
are alive. Let's do it. I'd be glad to. I have
I
great
mean,
friends, and it would be an honor to
I can
bridge
put
that
you.
gap.
Okay, well, I can put you in touch with who you would need to talk to
Yes,
for rights, etc.
I'd be
And
glad to do
we could.
that.
It would be wonderful, wouldn't it? And yes, it would be lovely. A bit like Shadow of the Gunman opening at the
Yeah.
Gate Theatre in Dublin in the 20s. It'd be
Precisely,
gorgeous.
precisely, because when I one of the things I do to keep my sanity in war, I've been through 1,500 and 30 something days of full blown war. We are now longer than World War One, not World War Two.
Mhm.
That's the shorter one. We're longer than World War One now here, and one of the ways to keep your sanity is to do weird creative shit. And good stuff that you really feel like when I'm on my balcony, just strumming the guitar and people downstairs have no idea. I'm like, I'm a sweet transsexual from Transylvania. So they don't have to relate to that. I have to relate to it. It's my guitar that things as drones fly over to bomb. And this is a part of the theater that you relate to is that theater during wartime has always been a big deal.
Yes,
It's an ultimate
and,
expression of defiance and
and
let's laugh
keeping
to our
one's
death.
spirits up. Yeah, yes,
Let's make it
yes.
happen.
I get it. Yeah. We in fact it's a survival mechanism, I think, isn't it?
We have
Um,
soldiers who fought in this war and come back with prosthetics and get on stage and act and as part of their cathartic rehabilitation and expression. And it is the most amazing. It'll move you beyond what you can feel
yeah,
that you can know. Yeah.
yeah, extraordinary. Well, I'll tell you what. Send. I'm not sure that I can. Whether your email address is on this. This
We'll get it through
individual,
Linus. Yeah, we can make sure you have all that. Yeah, of
yeah,
course.
okay, and then I can put you in touch with Merrill or Howard Panter,
Absolutely.
the Rocky Horror Company, and it may well be that it probably I could see you in this situation, you being able to do it for fuck all as it happens, you know.
Yeah.
I would have thought we'd be happy to come on board and allow this to happen in a war-torn country. As far as I'm
Absolutely.
concerned, it's a thumbs up from me.
Thank you, my man.
Yeah, I think that would be exhilaratingly wonderful.
I think it would be a great testament because, you know, one of the things that bothers me is when Russia goes out and says we're the champions of Christianity and all these great things. They're promoting hatred against gays around the world. They're promoting hatred against transgender identity. And in fact, most of the propaganda is, you know, they're going to transgender you. And it's like the idea that this is an intellectual weapon is just, it's part of what the resistance to the battle. Yeah.
Yeah. It's fascinating. Yes, it is fascinating.
I can think of nothing better than Riff Raff himself coming to bring the military that's necessary to destroy what is terrible.
But Abraham creation myth fantasy is mankind's greatest tragedy.
Yes.
It was that moment in time when we abandoned rationality. And when you think this dreadful entity, this God that Abraham dreamt up, approached the world after 4.5 billion years of us getting along quite nicely. And then he looked around the world. He looked at Mesoamerica, civilization there, nobody to pick there. Looked at India, civilization, no one to choose there. Finally chose Abraham as the man to be his mouthpiece, even though he's not a megaphone or the web. And this is idiocy, this childish fucking idiocy has enslaved us. And it stops us looking at our history intelligently. It stops us. It's the tragedy of humankind. We deserve better. That we're sentient species.
Mm-hmm.
That they're given the gift of thought, and we're 750,000 of the population of sentient beings would prefer magic to rationality. It's tragic.
And I think that which is part of our wonderfully already beautifully created universe is already magical anyway. It's already filled with wonder.
It's extraordinary. I mean, the reality. Yes. And we're at a moment of critical mass at the present. We're at a crisis at the moment for humanity, and we've reached it's a Galileo moment.
Yeah.
Because it took 200 years for the church to finally accept the fact. You know, yes, we do orbit around the sun rather than the universe orbiting around. But they, you know, to have denied it any longer would have made them look exceptionally foolish. And now we have the receipts, we have the fossils, we have the bones, we have the archaeology, the paleontology, and now we have the DNA trail. You know,
right.
Game over.
I mean, we are at a point in humanity, which is I'll say this is why I really wanted to reach out to you and Linus was after all the stress, I went, fuck it, I want to do what I want. I'm going to talk to someone who matters to me. I'm always chasing. I do a lot of serious interviews here in the country, and when I saw some of the people interviewing you guys after the documentary came out, I said, well, I'm just going to do what I want. I'm going to interview someone that matters to me. And you actually said this wonderfully in an interview about being selfish, that sometimes you have to find that side that says, this is really what I want and what I believe and where I want to go with it. And I really found that one of the things, and I want to leave this as our final thought for now, and you've got plenty of things you want to say, I'm open to you. But there's still young people and many people who are trying to figure out how to be who they are now in this terrible time, in this stressful time. And you've done this as a path now. What would you tell them that they need to focus on, or ways that they can get
well,
through
I would say
chaos?
I would say to any creative artist, nothing it comes out of a vacuum. Don't be afraid to steal from everywhere, plagiarize. Don't be afraid to do that. But if you do, you have to improve upon what you're stealing. In other words, use it as a tool, not as just plagiarism and just plain copying and all the rest of it.
Right.
There's no art without craft. But at the end of the day, especially I find I write now. I write cautionary tales for myself and my grandchildren.
Nice.
But without any pressures, nobody's looking over my shoulder. My only job is to make the next line as good as the one before. I don't have to worry about where it's going at the end. All I have to do is continue. I can spend a week on 4 lines, and I've got no one's pushing me. And I can have so much pleasure just playing with 4 lines for a week or more until I say, I'm very happy with that little section there. That's great. I'll keep that. Now I can move on. Please, it's pleasing yourself with your own reference. If we're watching other people's work and reviewing other people's work, as we do without being asked to review it, we do mentally. We go, we like this, and this is what we like. We must do that with our own work. We must be radical, think about it, and restructure, and try to hone it to a point where you go, actually, that's not fucking bad. When I get a couplet going, sometimes I get a couplet. I want to rush out in the street and stop people and tell them I just come up with a great fucking couplet.
Yeah. Exactly. Well, I mean, I write a lot cathartically, and I get obsessed at the cafe in the morning as a way of getting my energy out of what's going on. And sometimes it's tongue in cheek. It may be about politics, but I've got a certain edge that I just have to get done. And I will get on the phone immediately with people after I've done. It's like, you have to check out this latest thing. And I really decided to turn into something what I decided to do. Like I became my own news chief here instead of trying to get a job with someone else. And I encourage people around me to tell me the same way. When I work with others, I tell them, no, I need you to tell me what your best idea is, and then we're going to make that happen. Don't come to me for mine when I know you're a vessel of this.
Yes.
Richard, I love you dearly. I'm honored to be able to tell you that in person. And it's an honor to be able to say that, yes, I would love to bridge the world of your work plus your spirit to the people here, and also to a lot of people I know that are my former cast members, like my friend Ryan and Lynn, who all are part of this orbit. And there's a lot of people who are just stunned. They're like, of all the people who should interview Richard, it's definitely Chris, who also played Riff Raff. And you created something that changed our lives. And I hope you enjoy the sweetness of that.
I'm overwhelmed by the fact as it happens, and I can take no credit for it, or it's very kind of people to give me credit, but I really can take no credit for that. I remember sitting with somebody. I was in Singapore doing a show in Singapore, and I was sitting down there, and I said this person next door to me, I said, and I never really did anything to become rich or famous. It was never ever. It was never a driving point. To be rich or famous wasn't part of where I was coming from. And he turned around to me and he said, "What went wrong?"
It's nice to have a statue of yourself in your town, though. So for everyone who gets to see the documentary, and I don't want to give away too much, but there's a great scene of you being able to go up and marvel where you had once cut hair, and now there's this wonderful statue.
Yes. You were talking about people suggesting that association with gay people would turn them gay. The authoritative religious groups which had later shite. When that statue was going up, there were lots of people saying, "Oh, young children will pass by it," and you go, "What? They'll automatically turn gay? What's the fuck's wrong with you people?"
They'll be out there with the laser. No one bothered with the laser gun in public. It wasn't the laser gun in public, you armed alien. It was the fishnets. It is kind of interesting, though, that what terrifies people versus what should terrify people. They don't want to do anything that stops, mass shootings, but they definitely want to stop the fishnets.
And they want to bring the Bible into school and all that kind of crap.
Ugh.
Ridiculous nonsense. Ridiculous. There's not a single person out of the 750,000 of our population that believe in Abrahamic creationism, Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. There's not a single one of them who wouldn't agree that Abraham was clinically insane. I mean, the minute the minute you take your young son to sacrifice on a rock to a god, it's time to be locked up, isn't it? It is time to be locked up, and everyone would agree with that, and yet they were all happily out there with the fairies.
I've been listening to the soundtrack again a lot when I'm going around town, and when Riff comes bursting in, Frankenfurter, it's all over. Your mission is a failure. Lifetime's too extreme. I keep thinking of Trump. I keep thinking, I hope someone will come into the White House and say, you know what, we're done. We're taking this ship, and we're going to leave here now. And you've gone too far. And it's just it's that twist, the way you change the story right there. Everyone's having a party. We're all at Mar-a-Lago. We're jumping around. We're having we're messing everything up. It's completely out of control. And then in comes this sheriff. Nope, not so fast.
Yes, I saw Riff Raff as a party pooper. He was a sort of he didn't like other people having fun, did he?
I love you, dear man.
It's a pleasure.
Take care of yourself, and again, on behalf of Sabine,
and my love and best wishes to you and your neighbors.
Will do.
Bless you.
Take care of yourself. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.